Rocket is the key fintech hub in Lithuania, where top creators and founders build the future of financial technologies and the next generation of sustainable innovations. Acting as a dynamic ecosystem, we provide space for networking, expertise sharing, and cooperation, enabling and contributing to the success stories of the finance, technology, and innovation sectors. During the past years, our hub has established a leading position as the home of fintech and core place for fintech community.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gintarė Bočylienė. I am head of technology team at Invest Lithuania, and I am the moderator today at this session, which will focus on the new EU regulation on crowdfunding. So the new EU regulation aims to make the European Union marketplace even place for all of the countries and sort of harmonize the regulation and improve access for finance across the EU. So our question will consist of short presentations followed by a panel discussion and a Q&A session where you will have an opportunity to ask questions on Facebook or YouTube page, depending on where you're watching the session from. So I'll introduce the speakers now, starting with Mrs. Vilma Mačerauskienė, who is representing the Financial Market Policy Department at Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Lithuania. Hello, Vilma. Pleased to have you here.
Hello, Gintarė. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. And thank you for a kind introduction. And also thanks to organizers for inviting to this event. Great to be here with this audience. And I am sure that we will have a great exchange of thoughts today on the new regulation on crowdfunding. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So next, I'd like to introduce our guest from Germany, Mr. Carsten Wenslav, Secretary General at the German Crowdfunding Association. Hello, Carsten. Glad you could join us today.
Thanks so much, and I really appreciate this. I've in the past really admired how the Lithuanian alternative finance scene has developed, and it's like lots of interesting international players. And yeah, and I look really forward to this discussion today. Thank you.
Great, thanks. We also have joining us today Mr. Vytautas Šenavičius, Chairman of the Board of Lithuanian Peer-to-Peer Lending and Crowdfunding Association. Hello, Vytautas.
Hi, Gintarė. Hi, everybody. Great to see you and to be in this event. I hope we'll have a good discussion about alternative finance and the opportunities which we have in the future for Lithuania.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Mr. Artūras Konusevičius, CEO at Estate Guru, pan-European marketplace for short-term property-backed loans for SMEs. Hello, Artūras.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you here, and I'm very excited that so many people are interested in alternative financing at the moment. Really exciting.
Great. Look forward to hearing your story as well. So today I would like to kick off the session with a broader view on why crowdfunding is important, what is its role in the economy, and what are the future perspectives specifically in Lithuania. So it's fantastic that we have Vilma from the Ministry of Finance to give us a brief overview. So the screen is yours, Vilma.
Thank you, Gintarė, for handing over the floor, and I will try to share the screen and show in the presentation. Today I will briefly overview the current situation of the market and its perspective. So here is my presentation. Can everyone see it?
Yes, all good.
Okay, great. So let me begin from the market overview. And here what we can see from the chart, it's really a steady growth of the market that we were being able to watch from the beginning of this market. The annual average growth in the value of funded projects is nearly 300%. It's really impressive. At the beginning of this year, we can see here in the chart that there has been a slight slowdown in the growth, and well, this is due to the lockdown and also due to uncertainty and in general due to economic slowdown. But in overall, what we see already from the figures of this year, the platform operators' activity was not affected by COVID, and this is good news. Despite the unfavorable environment in the economy, the amount of projects financed this year in the platform was still growing. And someone could ask, how did this happen? Well, the answer perhaps quite simple. COVID is also creating opportunities. Economy and economic sectors needs financing more than ever before. Besides, what was the other tendency of the COVID? So basically, the behavior of clients and investors and consumers has shifted to the digital services. So basically, crowdfunding platforms appeared in a situation where they just needed to use this opportunity. Another tendency when we are looking at the numbers of investors, these numbers are also growing. The supervisory institution, Bank of Lithuania, was performing a survey, and what did they find out? So their conclusion was that investors, investors into different forms of financial instruments, they are looking into different opportunities to earn money, and they were not satisfied with the relatively small return on investment products offered on the financial markets. So they were looking for the alternative opportunities and obtaining a higher return. So again, crowdfunding for non-professional investors appeared to be a good alternative option to invest. At the same time, it is an option that does not require much knowledge and experience to potentially earn more returns. Well, I started from talking about the good pace of growth. We all understand that this might be from the supervisor's perspective, what the supervisor is watching at in these situations. So they are paying quite a great attention to ensure that this growth is sustainable. And at the moment, well, I think they are not worried or do not see the signs of war. So this is really good. And now let's move further. And here we have main milestones of the market development. So what are they? The first platform was established still in 2014, but this was just the beginning. A big impetus for the market development and expansion was the adoption of the law on crowdfunding, which was adopted in 2016. And Lithuania was really among the first countries in Europe to have this regime, and in this way to increase legal certainty for the market. Since then, we really watch a good start of expansion of the platform activities. We've seen this from the last slide and the chart in it. However, as thinking of the further growth, which would require crossing national boundaries to other countries, this was hampered a bit by the lack of harmonized crowdfunding regime in the EU, and this is really good news that we already have now this new regime at EU level. It will be started to be applied from the November next year. And well, these new EU rules will allow European crowdfunding platforms to provide new opportunities both for startups and also to investors. It will create level playing field, what is very important throughout the whole EU for all market actors, and also will encourage cross-border activities of currently locally established crowdfunding platforms. So, and what is good with all this, not only what I just mentioned, but the good thing is that we see that these new rules are quite close to what we already have in our national law, national regulation. What is showing? This shows perhaps that we were on the right track from the beginning, and the market will need only very minimal adaptation to this new European level regulation. So let's move further. Okay, and so what's next? And why do we need the so-called alternative financing? The question and the answer perhaps is quite easy and also quite complex at the same time. Business financing in Lithuania, also as in the whole EU, is very dependent on the banks. A lot of goods projects are being rejected in the banks, especially at an early project development stage. And what are the many of the studies are showing? These studies are saying that bank financing in many instances is contracting during the crisis, when the finance for SMEs, for companies, for the economy in general is needed even more than ever. So thus, in this regard, alternative financing can be more sustainable during the crisis times. Therefore, over the recent years, government was already making a number of attempts to promote alternative financing, and law on crowdfunding was one of the initiatives. Just to mention a few more, so that it also included improving environment for institutional investors, for investment funds activities, also measures to increase attractiveness of capital raising through public markets, and also measures aimed at retail investors. So that would be many of them, but today's topic is just crowdfunding. So what is good from all of this? It's good that we also see the same trends in the EU. It's always good to know that you have the partners in other European countries. And I'm pretty sure that many of you, if not all, have heard of the so-called Capital Markets Union initiative. This initiative, first of all, aims to foster strong and more sustainable economic growth. But how? By creating deeper and more integrated capital markets, removing barriers to cross-border investments, increasing competition and reducing costs in raising of capital, also improving access to financing of business, especially for small and medium enterprises. So, as I mentioned, it's good to know that we are not alone in the European Union, and we work hand in hand with our European Union partners, and I would say that was proven with the adoption of crowdfunding regulation. So let's move on. Well, so what's government doing in support of alternative financing? I think that I've already touched upon this very briefly, but well, maybe to repeat myself a bit. So first of all, of course, government acts through putting in place a legal regime. The role of government is to create a favorable ecosystem for crowdfunding market to grow. First of all, by ensuring legal certainty. Also at EU level, the regulation on crowdfunding that I already mentioned, and Lithuania was active in the EU institutions during the negotiation of this regulation. We advocated for harmonized regime with the hope that this will prevent gold plating, and will put all the market players on the same level playing field conditions. Also, where government is playing an important role, so in promoting sector with through the use of public financial instruments. To begin with, here I could mention the first supported crowdfunding instrument, Avieta loans, which was launched in 2018. We've seen a good cooperation here with the crowdfunding sector. Also, from nowadays perspective, during the lockdown, the government introduced a broad stimulus package of the economy in response to the crisis. And many of you perhaps know that the value, overall package value, was almost 5 billion euros, or nearly 10% of GDP. And the aim, among other things, was to maintain business liquidity and to stimulate the economy. Thus, crowdfunding sector again appeared in a very good position to take part in channeling these funds, or part of these government funds, into the sector. And this became one of the sources of growth of the sector. There are also many other opportunities that are coming. Government is stepping an investment program known as DNA Plan for the Future. Okay, this program is aiming at qualitative transformation of the economy and covering such areas as innovation, digital transformation, infrastructure, and climate. Also, Recovery and Resilience Fund will be channeled to Lithuanian economy. So what I'm referring to, so that all this environment, in this environment, crowdfunding sector needs to be flexible enough and catch up with the upcoming possibilities. And here in my slide, there is also mentioned attractiveness of jurisdiction. So this is quite obvious that this is among the aims, that overall environment for activities, for the establishment in the country would be favorable. So government is working a lot on the attractiveness of jurisdiction. And this, of course, covers many areas. It's being achieved through the joint efforts of both public and private sectors and their cooperation. It's also equally important to have a dialogue with the regulator. We understand this very well, and just could only confirm that in our case, this cooperation started. To have adequate understanding and measures for risk management, including AML or cybersecurity, is another important area where the government or the state is doing a lot. All of this is currently on the agenda. Hopefully, this will be highly on the agenda of the next government, who is in the process of being formed. So let me stop with this. And so that's briefly what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much. And I am giving the floor back to Gintarė.
Great. Thank you, Vilma, for sharing the insights on Lithuanian perspective. I thought it was really, really great to know more what the Ministry of Finance has planned for and how it looks at this sector. So now I'd like to invite Vytautas Šenavičius to continue with a more detailed overview on how the new regulation will change the European landscape, and also perhaps share some ideas on what can be done for Lithuania to capitalize on this situation.
Hi all. Hello. Just okay. Now you see me.
Yes.
That's great. So I will talk from the other side of the coin. I will talk about what the crowdfunding stakeholders in Lithuania did within these 4 years, and how they see whether we have the advantage on crowdfunding or not, and how to use the advantage. Because the issue is that well, when 4 years ago the law on crowdfunding came into force, we had also an obstacle. Why we have the obstacles like a crowdfunding market? Because some member states had the laws that regulate crowdfunding. Some left crowdfunding for just a soft regulation. I mean that there was no like a hard regulation under the law, so there could be some kind of code of conduct, but the crowdfunding platforms could have much more flexibility comparing to the countries where the law was like a hard law, which was where you have full regulation, where you have supervision, etc. And some member states didn't have any of it. I mean that in some member states the crowdfunding platforms could work just like regular legal entities. And in this different environment, crowdfunding platforms had to compete. So for, let's say, a crowdfunding platform which decided to provide activities from Lithuania, for such a platform, there was a lot of additional cost. I mean, the cost for the lawyers, the cost to comply with the laws, the cost to get the license. And at that stage, a few years ago, it was in some cases quite difficult to explain why we need the law. Because when you see that in other member states the same crowdfunding platforms can act without the law and can grow much more aggressively, then at that stage we didn't have the regulatory opportunity, or we didn't have such a lot of advantages in comparison with the other member states. But that times are in the past, and now this law which we have, the experience which we have to cope with the law, to understand what is regulation, and to understand, to have the good dialogue with the supervisor, gives the additional value for Lithuania. Now it seems that in Lithuania the crowdfunding platforms are prepared for the crowdfunding, and they are waiting for the cross-border activities which European regime allows. So the crowdfunding platforms which now has the license in Lithuania, they understand how to work under the laws. Our law, the crowdfunding law, is more or less 99%, 95% compliant with the European regulation. So the market in Lithuania is just waiting when they can do the legit cross-border in all the Europe. When there will be the single set of basic rules in all the Europe. So I think that this will, from one side, encourage investors to invest more in the crowdfunding platforms, and for the other, from the other side of the coin, it would be good for competition. Like I told that 2 years ago, some crowdfunding platforms could act without the supervision and without legal compliance and other expenses. Now all the crowdfunding platforms which will act in Europe will have to comply with the same basic rules. So these basic rules, of course, gives not only the cross-border, but also some additional protection for the investors. Because I would say just an example that, for instance, in some countries you could, let's say, safekeep the funds of the investors in segregated account. In the other countries, you could safekeep these funds just in simple account. So in case of default, of course, the segregated account could protect the funds of the investors. So given that there was a lot of variety and a lot of different understanding how the crowdfunding regime should work in every member state, now the current regime will allow us to have these unified rules and unified high-level protection of the investors. So this is the advantage which Lithuania has, and I see that this is a great opportunity for Lithuania. So together with the Ministry of Finance and with the idea from the Ministry of Finance and with a lot of work done by the Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Lithuania, we can move forward to make Lithuania as the crowdfunding hub in Europe. However, the advantage should be used really wisely, because we are not the only member state in Europe which is working to be compliant with the European crowdfunding regime within the next months. So, for instance, such countries like Germany, also Netherlands, are also working a lot to have also the flexible regime and to be competitive in the crowdfunding market in Europe. So when we see that a lot of job is done, a lot of work is done, this is good. It's good that we have the law. It's good that we have the law which is compliant, like I told, 95, 99% with the European crowdfunding regulation. But disadvantages right now, and I feel from the dialogue between European crowdfunding associations that the other member states are also working on that and trying to catch up the countries like as Lithuania, which already has a good practice in crowdfunding. So to use the advantage in general, to use it, we should also right now try to amend the laws as much as possible to make Lithuanian regulation not only compliant with the EU regulation, but also flexible as possible, because crowdfunding in general, this is not the novelty in the Europe right now. Crowdfunding is the phenomena which we have in the Europe for more than 10 years. So, and the crowdfunding regime is changing a lot. We have huge market participants which do the marketplaces. We see that some crowdfunding platforms does the bundle regime, so they are bundling the loans. We see that there is still a huge opportunity to do the equity crowdfunding, which is growing up every year. Invoice trading through the crowdfunding platforms is very interesting. So the idea what we are doing right now in Lithuania, we are talking with the Ministry of Finance. We are talking with the supervisor and trying to prepare the Lithuanian legal landscape to be compliant with European crowdfunding regulation, and also to be flexible for the crowdfunding platforms which would like to do the activities from Lithuania. That the crowdfunding would not be understood just as a lending crowdfunding and equity crowdfunding. That Lithuanian regime could be adopted for the crowdfunding, which also has some different view how the crowdfunding should work. I mean, the bundling, like I told, well, of the marketplace is also always a question. The crypto-related crowdfunding, etc., etc. So to use the momentum, to use the advantage, we don't need only the law. We also need to remove all the unnecessary borders. And we have the good news in Lithuania, because just one day ago, the committee in the Parliament of Lithuania confirmed that we should move forward with the law which allows to do the KYC with, for instance, driving license, which we didn't have such opportunity in Lithuania before. We should so remove the borders. We should right now, within this year, talk a lot with the supervisor and with the Ministry of Ministry of Finance to foster the crowdfunding platforms, to attract the crowdfunding platforms from the Europe. So every member state which wants to use the advantage should also have the strong national association which could cooperate to create this crowdfunding hub in the country. And given that European-wide discussions about the crowdfunding is still ongoing, and ESMA is also preparing the draft regulatory standards, how the crowdfunding regulation should work. To use the momentum, we should be the first which identifies the opportunities of EU crowdfunding regime and implements it in national regime and in the national Lithuanian crowdfunding environment. So to sum up the points, I see that we have the advantage, we have the law. A lot of work is still to be done to make our experience competitive in all the Europe. And now this is the time when we can use this advantage. So it's great that the Minister of Finance, Bank of Lithuania, is also taking into account that the alternative finance is a must, and the growth of the alternative finance is a must. So this year will be challenging. A lot of work we see still needs to be done. So we are working on that, and I hope that that Lithuania will become the crowdfunding hub in Europe.
Thank you, Vytautas. That's a great way to end your presentation. I do hope too that we will become the crowdfunding hub of Europe, as well as we have become the fintech hub. And we know that there are still quite remaining questions that need to be addressed, and I know that the regulation doesn't cover all of the answers. And you mentioned in your presentation that the discussion with other EU crowdfunding associations is ongoing, and that's why we're really delighted to have Karsten, who represents the German crowdfunding association, to give sort of a broader European perspective and perhaps the German flavor as well. So over to you, Karsten, to comment on that.
Yeah, thanks so much. So first of all, let me say that the two presentations we heard already show the big potential, and which Lithuania especially has. And I think I give you one example. The European crowdfunding service provider regime has essentially two parts. One is the so-called level 2 text, where ESMA, the European Securities Market Authority, has to provide some templates. And this concerns very specific articles. And then there's a lot of articles where ESMA is not going to create templates, but it's going to be up to the national supervisor and the National Ministry of Finance to sort of create a framework which is feasible for the crowdfunding and crowd lending platforms. So I give you one example. The Article 8 in the European crowdfunding service provider regime talks about conflict of interest, how a platform has to manage these conflicts of interest. And this is something where the central bank in Lithuania, together with the Ministry of Finance and together with the Crowd Lending Association, has to come up with a really good definition on what the platforms have to do when they apply to get the license, to demonstrate that they are managing these conflict of interest really well. And this is where you have to have a good relationship between these stakeholders, because it really comes down to some details. How do I explain this and this and this? So we in Germany, we also work closely with the Ministry of Finance, with our supervisor, which is BaFin. And so this is important right now, because there are still some unclear issues. Even though the European crowdfunding service provider regime is a regulation, but there was a shift in the negotiations. The shift was originally the European Commission proposed that ESMA supervises all of the platforms in order to create a really harmonized regime. But the member states said, no. I mean, we would like to supervise our platforms ourselves. And so now this regime is going to be developed by all of the member states in parallel. The time frame, as Wilma already mentioned, is that by November 2021, it's coming into it's possible to obtain the license. The law is already published and in effect, but it's only going to be enforced by November 2021. And ESMA is providing the templates for those level 2 texts. And there's going to be a public consultation starting in March. And so probably by July, August 2021, we will see how the ECSP license looks like. But that's not a lot of time until November to put this into practice and make sure that all these authorization procedures are in place. So that's why it's a really good dialogue is needed. And I think I agree with Vytautas that it's good to have a regime, a national regime in place which covers additional parts of crowdfunding. Now, the European crowdfunder service provider regime, it's already quite good, but it only covers issuers up to 5 million euros. It only covers securities. It only covers loans. And there's a number of financial instruments which are not covered by the European crowdfunding service provider regime. And there's also a number of new technologies which are specifically left out of the regime. For instance, ICOs, initial coin offerings, are left out of the regime. Or we are in a debate right now about security tokens. Security tokens on the blockchain, if they are structured like a security, then they might be within the scope, but depends on how they're structured. So this is like, one of these issues where we really have to look into the fine print and see what we can do there. And in order to have a good alignment between the national regime and the European crowdfunding service provider regime, it's important to do what Lithuania is doing right now, is trying to evaluate how to do this. For Germany, what I see is we already see a lot of interest of platforms coming to Germany, especially from the Baltic states. So we will have Arturas from Estate Guru speaking. We have other platforms like Mintos and Bondora, which are active in Germany. We have platforms like October from France, who are active in Germany, Funding Circle, Cedars, etc., which are opening up the offices here, which is great. And for us, it's as an association, we welcome this kind of activities. For our members, of course, it's an increased competition, but this is normal in a market which is growing so fast. So we really don't mind this kind of competition. What we as an association do, we try to cover the gaps of regulation. For instance, we have identified certain parts of areas which are not regulated yet. So with our self-regulation regime and our own reporting, we try to make it like a regime where the platforms can sort of harmonize their own work on making sure that investor protection is really working well on all areas, even those which is not covered yet by regulation. That's what we do in the German Crowdfunding Association. And then we also try to align our activities, what the platforms are doing with COVID-19. Just today, there was the report published by the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance on the impact of COVID-19. We can see that digital lending went down in the first quarters, but it's a full recovery. And so that's what I would like to forward in the Q&A as well, to see how the ECSP and COVID-19 can bring the industry back, or they have already seen this. I hope that this was already like a short input from my side. And thanks again.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you, Carsten, so much for sharing. And I really hope that, even though the competition in individual markets might increase, but, we hope that we can actually grow the market itself, and, we can attract more people to use and more companies to use that. So sort of both sides of the marketplace. So hopefully the outlook is really, really positive, at least from what we see now. So thank you very much, Carsten. And now we have the last presenter today, Arturas Konusavicius from Estate Gurus. And, we'd like to give you some time to present Estate Gurus success case and your outlook from the, crowdfunding platform perspective, how it all looks. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and very nice to be here today. And I will do my best to try to explain how important such European regulation is for the market participant. I will try to do it on the base of our own example. We are a cross-border platform. We were established in 2014, and the first projects in Lithuania started in 2017. In 2018, we had already more than 17,000 investors across different countries, not only Europe. But in 2019 already, we had twice more, like 37, which meaning that it's a very important service for the community. People are looking for alternative ways of investment, and these numbers are growing rapidly. In 2020, we already have more than 65,000 people. And regarding our numbers, we basically have more than almost 270 millions in loans, and at the moment we are operative in 8 countries at the moment already. I have to say that in these 8 countries, in those where it's necessary, in 3 of them, we have the licenses, meaning that we have license in Lithuania, we have license in Germany, and we have license in Finland. We are a cross-border, but we already need 3 licenses. So please, people, make one pan-European license. We definitely need it very much. This would make life much easier for us. Just to explain the demand, at least in Lithuania, on the Lithuanian figures, in the first quarter we have made a little bit more than 5 million. Then it came to during the pandemic, we came to 4 million, but then in quarter 3 made it almost more than 2 first quarters together, meaning that such service as alternative financing is very, very important for the market itself, because people and businesses, they need money and they need to borrow somewhere, and when the banks get to some restrictions, it is very important to have an alternative source of getting money. And the same with investors. Investors are always looking for the opportunities to invest. I always say that even at war, people are getting married and people are getting born, even when it seems that it's not the best time to do so. So investors are also, they go to investment, they see blood on the streets, etc. So such kind of tools, they are necessary at any times. We can see it even on the pattern of COVID-19. We see from this chart, you may see that in the first quarter 1 and quarter 2, there was some gap down, but in quarter 3 and now 4, we see that it's almost triple growth back, and these numbers are increasing. We are funding now almost 15 million per month. So such services and alternative financing is definitely growing a lot. We can see it even in our timeline since 2017 and 18. We are growing like 170% and 43%, and now we are again on 40% growth in 2020. We are expecting that we will grow the same 40% in 2021. Yeah. If we discuss it on European level, so since 2017 we have made in the beginning a little bit more than 22 million. Then it's plus 120%, 50 million. Then again 54% growth and 10% more. Such financing, alternative financing, is definitely on the hype, and it's definitely necessary. And to get it a little bit from the world's perspective and European perspective, we are calculating that there is around 40 billion of transactions of space of financing. So imagine that there is a pie of 40 billion which could be divided between the market participants. If you see the chart on the right, we would like, and our wish is that in Europe we would get a little bit closer to the American model, where we have bank financing only around 50% of all the amount Unfortunately, at the moment in Europe, we have more like, I would say, French model. At least in Baltic countries, we have French model, which is almost 90% of the transactions are financed by the bank. So I wish that we could get to 50%, and all the other 50% would get invested by alternative players. So hope this showed what the demand is, and I'm really looking forward to pan-European regulation, so we could have one license instead of 3 or more. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Artūras. That was great to see the journey, and that the graphs all tend to look upwards, so that's what we like to see. I'd like now to invite all of the participants today to join us on the screen and have a discussion on some of the questions that we already touched during the presentations today, and I'm sure that there's plenty more things we can unpack. And perhaps starting from macro impact, on the crowdfunding. So we've talked about the impact for the companies. We talked about the impact on the access to finance and investors as well. Perhaps if you could sort of share your number 1 or 2 points that you would like to leave the audience with, why it is important to grow the sector and why it really deserves the attention that it is getting now, and what it would mean for all of the participants in the market at either end. So could we start with Karsten, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. One of the things which is often not so obvious and visible is what I call investor education or financial education. What we see is that people who participate in crowdfunding and crowd lending as investors, they tend to start with small amounts, but then become more and more active in this field and educate themselves about the risk and the potentials. And that, if the whole population does this has impact for the wider fintech, because people then are more willing to accept digital payments. They more understand how robo-advisors work. They more understand how insurtech works. So crowdfunding is like an entry to many retail investors to understand how digital finance works. And that's why we really want to grow the sector. Obviously, access to finance and giving people the opportunity to diversify their portfolio, that's also really relevant. But for me, this is really one of the important goals of pushing crowdfunding, is to allow people to understand how digital finance works.
Great, thank you. Vytautas, would you have something to add?
Well, yes, I would just add that the large benefit is to find the good balance between the alternative finance and the banks, because let's not talk that banks are bad or alternative finance is good. There is no devil and angel game here, but the situation is like this: that we see that that during the crisis, crowdfunding, alternative finance did a tremendous job. For instance, in Lithuania, with all the programs, with Invega guarantees, with the finalizing real estate projects, which might stop due to the cut of the line from the banks. So we need a competition, and when we have the competition, then the benefit for the competition is the benefit for the business. So as much competition, as if we have more competition, if the alternative finance can compete with the banks, with the traditional financing, this is always good for the consumers. It's good for the business. It's good for the environment. It's good for economy. So that's my remark.
Great, thank you. And Artūras, perhaps you have, even some specific success cases that, that actually happened because, they had access to those alternative sources of finance.
Oh, even plenty. And well, maybe most interesting was that a couple of years ago, we had an inquiry to finance one construction in our very, like, not the biggest city, but still city, Šiauliai. And when you are from there, you go to any bank, and the answer you hear is like, it's not an answer, it's more like a laugh. And at the moment, with the money of the European investors, there is a new regitrend to let a building built, meaning that all the cars are getting registered there. It's like a 15 or 20 years lease agreement, etc. Meaning that there are so many different and very interesting projects built during that time with the money of investors. I know that we had some successful projects which were two-story, but they were so successfully sold that they had to build the third floor. And when you want to build something up, banks and no one, they don't believe that it can be possible, and we believed it. So it came out that instead of 2 floors, there was a developer sell 3 floors, and there are more families, happy families living, and the area is nice. It was built in Klaipėda, and all the newspapers are writing that, the face of Klaipėda is changing, and it's very nice. So in general, 270 million, it's not something very like large amount for the bank. But if we take it locally, if I would say, let's take 270 million and invest it in Gynėjų Street. And in Gynėjų Street, the building, it cost a little bit less than 270 million, but it made a huge impact for the city, for the face of city of Vilnius, etc. So there are definitely plenty of different success stories, and I think that we can create more and more of it.
Sounds great. And sort of looking at the other side, of course, this new regulation is great by leveling the playing field. But of course, it will present some challenges for companies, especially in those jurisdictions that did not have, let's say, as developed regulation nationally as, for example, Lithuania had. How do you think this might impact those providers and those platforms that have sort of, sprung up in the other jurisdictions, and they would need to adapt and perhaps transform some of the, activities or business models, perhaps starting with you, Artūras?
So we had already some of these players. I mean, during the pandemic, couple of players which were weaker, or I don't know how to call them in any other way. We had some bankrupts of such platforms who couldn't take it. So those which are still with us, we can say that those are, we can call them stronger, or someone who really understands what they are doing. On the other hand, we are operative at the moment in 8 countries, and we are receiving investments from 108 countries, and we are receiving inquiries even from Ethiopia. Yes, Ethiopia. Ethiopians are writing us emails and asking, could we invest somehow in your platform? Meaning how global such services are, and we must answer to 108 regulators or different different countries. How should we protect those investors? So how are we going to answer these questions on our own? So of course, in different countries, those who haven't had any regulation, but if they have some stronger market participants, they will, one way or another, they will go through it. Of course, those who doesn't have anything, it will be much harder for them to start from scratch. Like Latvians, for example, they haven't had any regulation, but they have pretty strong players like Mintos, which we can calculate in billions. So for them, it's much harder at the moment to get something very, very big, to take an elephant and try to adjust it to your refrigerator or whatever you have there. So we have an advantage here in Lithuania, at least from this side, but those who are unregulated now, they will need to choose: are they going to keep their activities in the domestic market on the rules that they had before, or they're going to step into the European market?
Great. Anyone else to comment on that? No? Okay, so I'll probably sort of another question on the regulation, which we all know is great but not perfect. So it would be great to sort of hear your thoughts. What are the shortcomings? We know that it doesn't cover everything. We know that there are still unclear areas. Karsten alluded to that. Do you think that this transitional period that we have until November 2021 is enough to actually solve and get those answers and the details? And what are still the areas that need most of the focus? Okay, Karsten, go ahead. And then
okay. Sure. Okay. Yeah, I think these will be solved because there's a clear mandate, and then also the European Commission has to evaluate the ECSP. I think in 2022, and so I think like a lot of these things which maybe didn't work out yet is will be solved. I think the biggest shortcoming is that the crowdfunding industry or the alternative finance industry is developing so fast that sometimes regulation cannot really catch up with it. So, I mean, one of the examples is really secondary markets. We see on platforms outside of European Union, for instance, in Israel, but also in the United States and also in Australia and in Hong Kong and so on. We see like a strong tendency to create secondary markets where people can trade what they have bought. And this will be a little bit more complicated in the European crowdfunding service provider regime because the platforms are not allowed to create a market price. And so these are certainly things which probably in the next 2 or 3 years will have to be solved once we see how the market develops.
Thank you. Vytautas, would you like to add on that?
Yeah, I would also just add that, just from our, from Lithuanian perspective, I think that there will be a huge challenge to first of all, to identify the questions which are problematic. And then because let's take the Lithuanian example, we have the law for 4 years, and we still have a lot of open questions. And we are solving this question, and after that we see another questions. So first of all, for the some member states where the crowdfunding is not developed right now, they don't have any laws, even maybe in some cases no code of conduct. They will be, first of all, very complicated, and it could take a year or two to understand for the regulator, for the supervisor, what is the crowdfunding, how it works, how to draw the line between the crowdfunding and, let's say, the investment firm or something like that. So first of all, I think that in general, this 2022 will come really fast, and we and all the countries will have a lot of questions. And I think that most of the countries within 1 year will not be ready for the crowdfunding regulation in general. They will have to adopt this regulation. They will have to apply it. But in general, there will be a lot of open questions when you will try to do the cross-border, because if we, let's say, didn't know anything about the crowdfunding, like a crowdfunding association didn't know about that, Minister of Finance didn't know about that, supervisor didn't know about that, didn't know the details about that. So it would be really complicated to put everything in our heads and in our market understanding within 1 year. So it will take time until all the countries will have necessary knowledge and everything would work smooth.
So perhaps sort of looping in the discussion back to Lithuania and addressing Vilma now, do we have, in Lithuania, do we have a specific sort of action plan, how we're going to use this time until the new regulation kicks in to make sure that Lithuania is prepared as much as possible?
Talking on the action plan, perhaps it's not final or not ready yet. But we are currently working on the implementation of the regulation, and we just a week or 2 weeks ago had a meeting with the market participants, and we agreed on the further formats of cooperation where we would be able to discuss further in detail what are those gaps in the regulation that needs further investigation, further discussions, and further further actions. So basically the work is underway, and as you correctly asked before on whether 1 year time is enough to prepare. So well, on the one hand, yes, 1 year is quite long time period, but on the other hand, Vytautas is correct also saying that when you start solving or discussing one questions, the new ones arise. So my hope is that the answer will be yes, and that we will be able to find those solutions, and also looking at the job being done at European Union level. I mean ESMA work that Carsten just referred. ESMA is working on level 2 legal acts. We all know that devil is in the details, so that's really very important to be a part of that work, to follow it closely, and well, hopefully all these kind of attempts will work.
Thank you, Dilma. So I'll just make a note that, you know, we are receiving some questions, but they are quite specific in their nature. So our panelists will endeavor to answer them directly to the chat. And I'm just being mindful of the time. I would like to ask the last question, which I think is, you know, it's sort of far-fetched, but it is important, as you know, especially for Lithuania, for it to be attractive from the individual investors' perspective, as this sort of playing field for crowdfunding will be, you know, leveled up across the EU. Jurisdictions will compete on the tax regimes, how people are taxed on their returns. And of course, there are no unified tax rules yet at the EU level, and some countries, you know, sort of have individual tax regimes that are more favorable than it is in others. And Lithuania, in this, from this perspective, hasn't been very competitive. And, you know, my question again would be sort of, you know, thinking what could be done to make Lithuania more attractive and sort of help boost this sector from the investors' perspective.
Yeah, well, talking on tax regime, it is always complicated because, well, you, Gintare, were right saying that taxes are not harmonized throughout the EU, and well, Lithuania is doing a lot of attempts to have attractive regime in this regard also, and we've seen a number of amendments in the laws, especially those that are aiming at the development of fintech sector. But I think your question also refers to the tax regime on related towards the investors. So I was mentioning that a new government is coming quite soon, and since taxes is a very political issue, so hopefully that in the program of the new government we will find further measures to improve this sector. Well, so far we had so with the current government on investment savings account regime, and also some other issues. So I cannot say for sure anything at the moment while the government is under formation. So, but this is also my hope, and I believe the hope from the market that many things can be included into the program and then solved. So yeah.
Okay, so Carsten, go ahead, and then we'll have.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so I think one of the really important part of how to push this sector is by these public and collaborations between the government, the supervisors, and also the platforms. Right now, we are working on a project by the European Commission on how to improve this, for instance, to bring cohesion funds and and structural development funds together with crowdfunding platforms. And we are using the best practice of Lithuania, which Vilma mentioned, as an example. But of course, we can see many more ways how to do this. Guarantee schemes, tax incentives, and so on. So I think by the spring, April 2021, we will have like some guidelines on what public authorities can do in order to push the sector. But I want to say that I think Lithuania is doing already quite a lot, also by reaching outside of Europe, to Asia and to the States, to helping these fintechs grow.
Thank you, Vytautas.
Well, just maybe I can just summarize from my side that I think that taxation could be the opportunity or could be the heel of Achilles, because if we're talking about the investor's account, this could be also the solution. But the most important is that crowdfunding should be easy to use and easy to implement in general. So, for instance, if the investor has to pay, let's say, 60 euros, and for these 60 euros he has to waste 2 hours to fill some kind of forms, it would be the challenge for him, and he's not happy then again with the platform. So we have a good discussion in Lithuania. We have a good way to make the taxation as flexible as possible, all the regime, all the procedures for crowdfunding. And I think that this is one of the questions which is relevant for all the countries where the crowdfunding is advanced. And we are in this situation. So if we solve it, we can really do a lot of in all the Europe.
Sounds good. So I am afraid that our time has come to an end. It really flew by. I definitely enjoyed the presentations. Thank you, Vilma, Karsten, Artūras, and Vytautas. I thought the discussion was really insightful, and I hope that the audience enjoyed it too. We will, as I mentioned, answer the remaining questions in the discussion after the stream ends. And also at this stage, I would like to thank everyone for joining in. And to sum up the discussion, I think it is clear that crowdfunding is hugely important for Lithuania from all perspectives. It can help improve access to finance for SMEs and smaller companies. It, of course, helps individual investors, helps improve financial literacy, and encourage more people to be involved in investing activities safely. It could also have a huge effect on the economy and again, strengthen Lithuania's position as a fintech hub and a leading one from the regulatory and other perspectives. So I think we can all agree that we are on a good path. There's still a lot of work to be done, and hopefully we can create great conditions for the crowdfunding market to grow here in Lithuania. Thank you all, and goodbye.